restricted format, there's actually no restricteds to hit the field to start the game.
That is wild. We are going to see Gio have that Flutter Mane next to that Choice Scarf Chi-Yu, and for James Evans, he's opted into bringing that Incineroar next to the Brute Bonnet to start.
So yeah, I think the Brute Bonnet is a really good defensive option from James's end because you have that Water Terra. Gio does not have a way to really take advantage of that and hit you for super effective damage, right? So right now, Incineroar is, of course, applying Fake Out pressure immediately into the Chi-Yu slot. Chi-Yu could go for a Ghost Terra to get around that, but do you really want to commit to that? And then, of course, Brute Bonnet right now on James's end can launch a Spore, can go for that Water Terra defensively. You don't faint to a Fire type attack or a Fairy type attack. And so my question is, how does Gio respond to this? Do you have your own Brute Bonnet to switch into? Because if so, that means you drop one of your restricteds. I like this defensive lead from James's end, knowing Brute Bonnet can really start slowing down the pressure that you want to apply.
Well, there aren't going to be any swaps. It's just a Terrestrialization to start off our first game, and it is the Brute Bonnet as a James Terrestrialization Pokemon of choice in game number 1. Brute Bonnet, the Water Terra, as you called out, such a nice defensive typing to have, not even just against those fire types from this Chi-Yu and Koraidon, but of course because of that Flutter Mane. As you see the Incineroar go for the Fake Out, it's going to stop the Chi-Yu in its tracks for this turn, but the Moonblast still does a lot for its troubles, though. This Brute Bonnet is able to land a Spore into the Chi-Yu, one of the biggest offensive pieces here for Gio.
The Geo slows down the Chi-Yu, but Chi-Yu actually isn't really the biggest threat to Brute Bonnet and Incineroar right now, right? And so Flutter Mane, that beats of Ruin, giving you that special defense drop, allowing you to do even more damage to Brute Bonnet. This Brute Bonnet can't protect, so you are vulnerable to just eating up another Moonblast right now. Of course, it has the ability to go for Sucker Punch, try to break that Flutter Mane's Focus Sash. You could double up into that slot. Flutter Mane does have the ability to go for Protect, allowing Incineroar to maybe launch an attack right now. But James has slowed down some of the offense, but Gio still has so much coming out from this Flutter Mane right now.
And the Chi-Yu, while it has to take that mandatory turn of sleep, it could wake up on the next turn, and so you're really only stopping this Chi-Yu for just a short while. And Gio doesn't want to take the risk, actually decides to put the Flutter Mane back in its Pokeball for later, and brings out a Brute Bonnet of his own, maybe suspecting that a Spore would be going into that Flutter Mane's way. It's also going to get past this Sucker Punch, and that's going to fail as this Chi-Yu does take a turn of sleep.
So the Brute Bonnet is in the back. There is an answer to the sleep here, and you've actually gotten enough damage onto the opposing Brute Bonnet where you do pressure, of course, with damage from the Seed Bomb on your own end. That is the one way you can hit it for super effective damage. And so I wasn't expecting Gio to drop one of his restricteds coming into this. I think my guess is it's probably that Lunala. We'll have to wait and see. But right now you have gotten the Terra out from the opposing side, and your Brute Bonnet is looking pretty scary right now. If you win the Brute Bonnet war, then you can, of course, apply pressure and then start putting things to sleep with Spore yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you could Seed Bomb this, or, you know, the Brute Bonnet is also no longer a grass type, so just Spore that slot safely as well.
Let's see. I think what's so interesting about this matchup coming into it is both players had so much time to prepare for it, and I think this game now looks so different from then if they had just played immediately, say, yesterday, right? And so both players have had so much preparation time. Chi-Yu is going to stay asleep here.
Another turn here for James to take advantage of as the Brute Bonnet does go for the Spore. In case that Chi-Yu had woken up on this turn, we do have the knockoff into Gio's Brute Bonnet, which will knock off the Citrus Berry as Brute Bonnet fires off a Spore of its own, putting this Incineroar to sleep.
It has been such a defensive game to start. Like, we have not seen a restricted Pokemon hit the field yet. Everyone has just been trading sleep left and right. And I think it's a little bit scary right now because you know if you switch in your restricted Pokemon and it gets put to sleep, it's probably just going to be rendered useless in this battle. And so both players are really wary of that. They don't want to make that switch out. Chi-Yu right now is exerting, of course, offensive pressure onto the Brute Bonnet. Should it manage to wake up, it can go for something like that Dark Pulse and target down that Brute Bonnet. So we're going to see another switch from Giovanni.
Gio now removing the Brute Bonnet and deciding to switch the Koraidon in its place. So all 4 Pokemon for Gio in this game number 1 have been revealed. But notably, this Koraidon is going to be setting the sun and giving a photosynthesis boost over to James's own Brute Bonnet. But what about the sun is setting itself up for this Chi-Yu as we see Incineroar, the first to move here, taking its turn of sleep. Sucker Punch into the Chi-Yu, so you know it might be able to go for an attack on this turn, but it stays asleep. Another critical turn of sleep here for James.
Crucially staying asleep. that was an opportunity to maybe wake up and get a Dark Pulse off. However, now you have positioned the Koraidon in, right? And this is the amount of offense that you are looking to exert. Koraidon can now go for the damage onto Incineroar, try to threaten that with the knockout, and Chiyu then can, of course, wake up and get the Dark Pulse into Brute Bonnet. I don't think Chiyu feigns from another Sucker Punch either, right? And so Gio took a little bit of a risk there because with Koraidon switching in, it could have been Spore into that slot, but are you really going to Spore the Brute Bonnet? And so it's a great bait by Gio, and now he has finally gotten the offense out in the field. This is going to be a really big turn. Can James even play defense here? I think the best thing to do is maybe if you have that Shadow Rider, switch it in and take a fighting type attack on that Incineroar slot.
But what if Gio calls that and actually decides to go after an attack onto this Brute Bonnet instead? Incineroar wakes up and goes for Helping Hand onto the Brute Bonnet, and that's one way that you can make sure this Incineroar does something on this turn. The Sucker Punch into the Chiyu, that was enough damage to get the knockout, and so Gio is not able to utilize this Chiyu at all this game number 1.
Yeah, Sucker Punch itself won't get the knock, and you see Flame Charge come out as well. I think part of what Gio's thinking is, I want that speed boost, and I think you're probably going to switch Incineroar out, but it's an incredible turn for James there as he manages to get the wake up that gives him the extra damage that he needs to get the knockout onto Chiyu. And so I think that was what looked like a really scary position for James, ends up being much more positive.
Well, at least you have the free switch into your own Brute Bonnet that's also going to be getting that photosynthesis defense boost. But how helpful is that really going to be when you're still trying to get your first knockout in this game? This Brute Bonnet has a defensive Water Terra. You're really hoping that your Chrome Koraidon is able to do some major damage here.
Absolutely, yeah. I think now the damage definitely has stalled out a little bit, right? Like Helping Hand Sucker Punch was a cool way to get that knockout, but now you don't have very much offense. You are staring down such a powerful Koraidon that's positioned so well. And the Brute Bonnet on the opposing side is, of course, very scary as well. One thing that's crucial to note is that James's Brute Bonnet, or James's Incineroar, does not have that Flare Blitz. And so without Flare Blitz, you don't have that ability to just threaten a lot of damage onto Brute Bonnet. So I think this turn, once again, I think it's still scary for James. He got the better end of it the previous turn, but we'll see how this one plays out.
Both trainers, of course, taking their time as they know how perilous these next couple of turns can be. And James wants to save this Brute Bonnet for just a little bit later. The Shadow Runner Calyrex now going to be the Pokemon that hits the field. The first restricted Pokemon revealed for James in this first game.
And the question is, did the fighting type attack go into that slot? Close combat goes into Calyrex. That's the play I was talking about the previous turn. And James now gets the parting shot off. Oh my goodness, he's gonna be able to pivot out a little bit more. Brute Bonnet, of course, still has the ability to go for a Spore, can put something to sleep, but it's a beautiful bait into the Calyrex slot, and it manages to at least switch in for free for now.
That's a huge deal. I mean, Gio is really hoping to get as much mileage as possible out of this Koraidon, and every single turn that James is able to negate that damage and just continues to start to swing the tides into his favor. But what comes out now into this Incineroar's place?
That's the first question, and then the second question is, Brute Bonnet, who are you targeting, right? Sleep is such a big deal in this matchup, and this is the thing that we were talking about before we came into the game. The defense matters so much. You're looking to slow down pieces so that your offense can just start punching holes. It's Brute Bonnet coming out from the opposing end. Of course, it's Water Terra, so let's see. Where does Gio's Brute Bonnet target?
Okay, well, after the photosynthesis boost, we get to find out our answer, and it is just the Brute Bonnet that James switches in that will take that. Still not a horrible trade to have made there. A Spore onto anything is still going to be of great benefit to Gio's game plan.
Yeah, I think James is happy with that, though. You saw you did a little fist bump. If that Calyrex gets put to sleep, it probably just does not get to attack in this game. So at least it's Brute Bonnet, which is the defensive piece. Calyrex right now is exerting a lot of offense, and crucially, you were able to neutralize the Chiyu in the early game, right? So with Chiyu eliminated, that no longer threatens Calyrex. It's still an awkward position for Calyrex, quite frankly, because your moves are Astral Barrage, you have Psychic, you have Encore, but which of those are really that powerful right now, right? The Koraidon, of course, on the opposing side also got that Flame Charge, so has the speed boost, can threaten the Calyrex with the double up right now. We're gonna see a Terra come out.
Feels like it has to be that Koraidon to go Terra Fire. You don't want to be super vulnerable to any of those extra attacks coming through later, but for now, it's also going to help you boost up your fire type attacks in the sun, whether it's the Flame Charge or that Flare Blitz. But Calyrex knows it has the pressure of a Sucker Punch from this Brute Bonnet, but we'll see James's Brute Bonnet also take its first turn of sleep.
Exactly, and it is the close combat. It's not a fire type attack into Calyrex, but this now gives James a free switch-in. Do you actually want to give him that free switch-in right now? That's scary. The other thing to note, Koraidon now takes life orb damage. You've dropped your special defense. Calyrex, of course, can apply a lot of pressure with damage with an Astral Barrage, right? And so Brute Bonnet is not going to get the Spore off. James is willing to trade his defensive pieces, and he's looking to position his offense right now. So my question here is, do you finally bring out your fourth Pokemon?
But I feel like Incineroar just makes such a great call here, knowing that you're able to keep an attack drop onto this Koraidon. Maybe it also forces Geo to have to try to switch out this Koraidon. You can play a bit more predictably that way, but it is going to be the Koraidon. So the fourth and final for James now, also revealed in here. Both restricteds for him have hit the field.
Oh, this is so scary for Geo though, right? Like the Brute Bonnet now cannot Terra on the opposing end. Koraidon, of course, provides that collision course pressure, and there's that special defense drop from the opposing Koraidon. So if you're Geo, you could double up onto the Calyrex here with a Sucker Punch and a close comp or a fire type attack. Obviously, you don't want to close combat a Calyrex, but if you go for that, and Calyrex, of course, could go for a Protect, it could switch out as well. And the question is, how do you get out of this turn positively? James has played so defensively for so long, but this is it. This is the turn to finally exert so much offense.
If you get one more knockout here, James is in such a good position to close out this game with a win, but he has still a tough call to make. Koraidon now going to switch out, wants to also try to cleanse those special defense drops, as Fluttermane is going to be the Pokemon that takes its place. Super risky when you're staring down the barrel of an Astral Barrage, but knowing if you can hold on with this Focus Sash at the end of the day, then you will be able to help yourself out with that speed boost. And good thing for this Fluttermane, it's the Shadow Rider Calyrex. It also decides to take a reprieve.
So much defensive play from both ends. There was a lot of offense being exerted. It's going to be the Sucker Punch. There was the ability to, of course, go for a Spore, but trying to get damage there. And Collision Course, it's a fantastic turn for James here. It's going to deal super effective damage into the Brute Bonnet and get a one-hit knockout.
No way. Another Pokemon down, and only two more to go here for James to close out this first game. And Geo at least has timed it so that you can bring this Koraidon out when the sun has freshly expired, but you're also going to still be giving that sun over to the opposing Koraidon.
Now you have positioned yourself where you have Fluttermane and Koraidon. There's no more Terra available, so you can just go Moonblast into Koraidon, close combat, instantly Incineroar. So then the response, obviously, right now, Incineroar, of course, does have Fake Out pressure. You could just protect to bypass the Fake Out pressure. One of the key things that we've already seen this turn is, do you predict the Shadow Rider to switch in? Geo's gone 0 for 2 on it so far, right? He went for the Flame Charge when Incineroar was out on the field, and then tried to close combat, and then the Calyrex Shadow Rider switched in. So it feels like if Geo gets it right, he gets such a major advantage, but if he gets it wrong, of course, does lose him a lot of momentum.
It's hard when you have to make that call, knowing that there are so many distinct possibilities of the outcomes of each of these individual decisions, and hopefully it's all going to boil together and get you a win in this game. And so both trainers, of course, still taking all the time they can in order to make the most informed decision possible.
The Focus Sash is being conserved on the Ghost types is such a big deal here. So here we go. It's actually a pivot immediately into a Shadow Rider, saying you might just go for a Protect with your Pokemon right now.
If it is a Protect, maybe Geo is able to try to read one step ahead and go for a Flare Blitz into that slot instead. That would do major damage to that Calyrex. But no Moonblast first, there's no Protect. The Koraidon gets knocked out in one hit, and just like that, Geo is evened up the Pokemon count.
Oh, that's a really greedy play there. And Flame Charge as well! All it takes is one key turn, and that's what Geo gets. Of course, Focus Sash keeps Calyrex around for another turn, but this game, I think, is about to end.
Two speed boost now onto this Koraidon, another speed boost onto this Fluttermane because of that Photosynthesis. And even though the Incineroar comes back out onto the field, you can only fake out the Koraidon. This Fluttermane is still free and clear to steamroll right past his Calyrex.
And this is where committing that Water Terra early with Brute Bonnet put James in a really difficult position against late game Fluttermane. I love how Geo recognized Fluttermane's really good into your team. I'm gonna save it. Of course, we started the game off with it. It never took any damage. It never got put to sleep. Imagine if the Spore went off into the Fluttermane on turn 1 rather than the Chi-Yu, but James gets a little bit greedy there and gets punished so heavily. And I just don't see a way for him to win this one.
There's still a will, and sometimes that means there is still a way, but James is going to go ahead and take this turn to protect the Calyrex and at least give himself some time to think heading into the next game. Incineroar is the next to fall with a big close combat from this Koraidon. Another one-hit knockout for Geo, to try to get James a victory here.
Oh my goodness. I mean, if you look at this game, the key turn really was that double KO, or KO plus 1 HP, almost a KO. Calyrex basically is fainted, right? Like, at that point, once the flame charges happen and there's the Flutter Mane with the speed boost, you just can't handle it. And Shadow Rider just didn't really do much in this game, right? It never really clicked any damage, and so I think Shadow Rider's just really awkward here to use. This Flutter Mane secures the knockout, and Gio goes up 1 game.
So back and forth there for those middle couple of turns until that pivotal moment, as you called out, and as soon as Gio started to stack knockout after knockout after knockout together, you could see he could taste the victory of that first game and is now 1 game away from becoming a world champion.
So I want to talk about adjustments here. I'm genuinely shocked the Raging Bolt did not come out in that game. I thought like this would be a war between Brute Bonnets, and it kind of was honestly for the first couple turns, but I thought Raging Bolt from James's end is really, really powerful here because it can take that special damage. You can even Terra, of course, to get around, you know, Moonblast, for example, dealing super effective damage. And so I think, you know, James was playing really defensively, and even though he was able to get Shadow Rider out on the field, like, that's not really the most powerful Pokemon in this matchup, right? Especially because it doesn't have a way to boost its damage output. It's very fast as well, but it's not gonna get those one-hit knockouts. And so I really like how Gio managed that early game. If you're expecting Flutter Mane and Chiyu once again, then the question is, what are the possible responses, right? And I am definitely looking at that Raging Bolt to start because I think it can at least soak up special damage. Koraidon, of course, can also go for a Terra immediately, Fire Terra Koraidon, and then just start launching damage, go for your own flame charges. And so I think if I'm in James's shoes, one mode I would consider adapting to is Koraidon plus Raging Bolt.
If we saw the Shadow Rider Calyrex hit the field, I would have liked to see it at the beginning, but it is tough when James doesn't have that speed control available to him in the same way that Gio does. But I can hear the crowd right now. Who you cheering for?
There we go. Gio is 1 game away from winning the World Championships and his very first tournament. James, of course, has his back up against the wall, but he's been in so many tournament finals before, and I think he definitely has the experience to take us to a Game 3, but I think James just needs to find the position for offense a little bit more. You know, he managed to make some nice defensive plays, but never really got his offense position, and I think Gio's offense was already more impressive, and Gio was just 1 step ahead, and so Raging Bolt's the one Pokemon that I really, really have my eyes out on. I think Incineroar from James's end is nice for a fake out, but the problem is it becomes such a liability against the close combat from Gio's end, right? And so the Incineroar not having Flare Blitz, I think honestly makes it a slightly weaker pick in this one as well, because you can't do nearly as much damage to Brute Bonnet.
I almost also see a world where, yeah, you leave the Incineroar at home or the Shadow Rider Calyrex and then bring out the Raging Bolt, as you were saying, but then what about the Landorus here? Do you ever like that at all when some of these Pokemon are, in fact, like Terra Fire Koraidon, Fire-type Chiyu?
Yeah, I think Landorus feels really awkward to bring here, but it's certainly possible, especially because you have a defensive Terra with it as well. I think if you are bringing it, you have to be so careful because it means you probably have to Terra your Landorus. If you're Terraing Landorus, it means you're not Terraing anything else, and it leaves you so vulnerable to so much damage.
Well, our trainers are locked in. They are ready to go as the second game gets underway for the grand finals at the Pokemon World Championships. And for Gio, he is confident in his Game 1's game plan, decides to go for that Flutter Mane and Chiyu again, as well as James Evans running back this Incineroar and Brute Bonnet combo.
Okay, so we saw this played out last time, right? Fake out into the Chiyu, Terra Water the Bonnet. I think James now might be like, okay, Chiyu wasn't actually a problem that last game. It was the Flutter Mane. So now you maybe consider going for a Spore onto a Flutter Mane slot instead. Flutter Mane, of course, could go for a Protect. Gio does have the ability to just go for the Terra on Chiyu immediately. It's Ghost Terra. That would give you immunity to Fake Out and allow you to just go for something like a Dark Pulse plus a Moonblast into a Brute Bonnet. So let's see if any Terras come out. No Terras, no Fake Outs.
It's just going to be a Sucker Punch right into the Flutter Mane as the Brute Bonnet is going to take the Dark Pulse. As though there is a bit of a trade of damage, but as the Flutter Mane follows up, the Brute Bonnet just goes down with a double up here from Gio. And James has lost his first Pokemon in this second game. Incineroar still gets a chance to move and decides to go for the knockoff, so that will remove the Choice Scarf of this Chiyu and at least make it a little bit less speedy.
A little bit of split in damage there. Of course, you had the ability to maybe target the Flutter Mane down and just try to KO it immediately. James obviously taking a really big risk there on turn 1 as well, not going for that Water Terra. But you can see Gio was predicting the Water Terra, so he went for that Dark Pulse. So both players really just trying to get into each other's heads. Of course, the Calyrex Shadow Rider now hits the field. There is no more Choice Scarf on the Chi-Yu, but you can't, I don't think, knock out the Chi-Yu here. I'm not confident that Helping Hand Astral Barrage does. Maybe if you go for Ghost Terra with the Calyrex, you can go for a Helping Hand Ghost Terra Astral Barrage. Geo could potentially switch into Koraidon, give Flutter Mane the speed boost, allow it to get an attack off, but yeah, I think the main question I have here is, do you commit to Helping Hand Ghost Terra Astral, and if so, does it knock out the Chi-Yu?
That would certainly be a very ballsy play to make, but maybe that's exactly what James needs in order to get back into this game after losing a Pokemon so early. That's the type of aggressive call we need to see from this team.
And here is going to be a switch. I think you also could just go in and Brute Bonnet if you brought it, because there's not that much threatening it with offense, and so there it is.
Brute Bonnet now, at least this Flutter Mane can go back into its Pokeball and come back out later. As we saw Geo in that first game preserve it, and ended up being a key piece to that success. Protect on this Calyrex Shadow as Geo, without that Choice Scarf intact, can actually switch up this move as well. This is another way that you can utilize this Chi-Yu with those snarls. You would have loved to be able to land that into the Calyrex Shadow and also drop its special attack, but you'll also take some chip.
I think the Calyrex just is so awkwardly positioned right now, right? You're up against two Dark-type Pokemon, and you just, like, don't have that much offense. You can't really use Psychic, obviously, and so you're relegated to Astral Barrage. Astral Barrage just isn't that strong right now. I was like, well, the only way you can get the knockdown is you can, like, commit Ghost Terra and Helping Hand. That's just so many resources.
It's a lot of resources, and now when you see this Koraidon hit the field, I think the problem becomes even more compounded. You have the Chi-Yu as well that's going to be have a pretty good time, I think, into this Koraidon, especially if you do want to commit that Terra onto it. But then you also have this Brute Bonnet, which with this defense boost might be able to deal with this Koraidon as well.
Yeah, I think the upside for James is now you at least have your restricteds out on the field, and you're not scaring down as much offense from the opposing side. There is still, of course, the pressure of Sucker Punch into Calyrex, though, and I think Calyrex losing its Focus Sash is very, very scary. So if you're James, do you consider going for a switch out, right, and to try to get around that Sucker Punch? Koraidon right now, I do think, is in a phenomenal position, but you also have to worry about the opposing Brute Bonnet, because if you are not able to get the knockout onto the Brute Bonnet and it puts either of these to sleep, it's a disaster. And I think this Terra makes a lot of sense. I would expect it to be on the Brute Bonnet, and it's going to be on Koraidon to start.
Yeah, Koraidon first, and then we'll see if Geo has decided to respond to that with a terrestrialization of his own. But this Koraidon now uniquely positioned to be able to at least get some more damage down, hopefully before it does get put to sleep by this Brute Bonnet. But Geo does go for that water terrestrialization, so a great Terra here, but both of them, you know, they're going for the gold now. With both of these terrestrializations expended, a lot is going to come down to the rest of this turn. That Brute Bonnet is no longer a dark type, and as this Astral Barrage gets fired out, this Brute Bonnet actually takes about 70%
it's
damage.
Flame Charge!
The Flame Charge is going to give this Koraidon a boost, but as it goes into the Chi-Yu, it actually gets a knockout.
It gets the knockout, but Brute Bonnet survives the turn there. I was thinking, well, if you just double up until a Brute Bonnet slap, can you get the knockout with Astral Barrage and Collision Course? This is now a Spore coming out, and it's going to go out into the Shadow Rider, now putting it to sleep and putting it in a really difficult position.
The Shadow Rider going to sleep, it still has full HP, it still has that Focus Sash, but is it going to be able to actually do anything when you still have that Flutter Mane in the back? Giovanni still has one more Pokemon that he can reveal as well, but I think it's actually really big that James got that Flame Charge for the Koraidon. That speed advantage is huge.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's such a big deal in being able to outpace the opposing Koraidon. If the Sun gets stalled out, then you can outpace the Flutter Mane as well. And so I think, yeah, that was a big, big turn in terms of damage. It's going to be Koraidon coming out now from Geo's end. This Koraidon, of course, is really powerful. It should not get the one-hit knockout, though, onto the opposing Koraidon with a close combat. My question then is, can you go for a Sucker Punch in close combat, try to get the knockout there? And if you're James, you can consider protecting the Koraidon, trying to bypass a turn of sleep with the Calyrex, and hope that you can wake up sooner than later with it.
You have to get a little bit lucky, though, with those sleep turns.
Yeah.
And as we know, sometimes they can sleep for a little bit longer than you would like, but you have to take your first turn of sleep on this upcoming one.
And this is a scary one because, once again, it's like there could, of course, be a switch into the Incineroar, but then it just can eat up a close combat potentially, right? I think that's been one of the really fun dynamics to watch. But Koraidon does go for the Protect, like I suggested, trying to just take that first turn.
But if Gio has opted into going for damage onto that Shadow Rider Calyrex instead, this could get dicey very quickly.
Oh,
Gio,
yeah.
though, actually goes for the close combat into the Shadow Rider Calyrex, maybe expecting a switch-in. Something like that Incineroar would have been knocked out or put to sleep.
That turn was so scary because I could see it for Gio. If you made the call, you doubled up with a Calyrex, you might just be world champion, but it's really hard to make that play. Are you just going to ignore the Crydon from the opposing end? But you called it, Rose. You still got to get lucky with the Calyrex. If you stay asleep, you will not get anything off with it. And so James ends up buying himself a turn, but right now, it's still difficult. I'm not even confident a collision course from that Crydon knocks out Brubonnet now that you've gotten rid of your dark typing and you have the defense boost, and that would be a disaster. So here we go, collision course.
Collision course heading right into that Crydon's way instead, bringing it down to about 70%
Oh,
of
it stays
its
asleep.
HP. And Shadow Rider Calyrex just cannot wake up. It is sleeping at the wheel as it has to take a flame charge. Its focus dash gets broken, and now it's Gio's Crydon that gets a chance to get a speed boost, and now starts to bypass the speed advantage that James's Crydon had. Brubonnet follows it up with a sleep, and this is a huge turn for Gio.
Gio must be able to taste the World Championship victory, but he's still got to get there. You got to do enough damage to the Crydon, of course. And so, once again, an opportunity to maybe double up onto a slot, but instead says, you know what, I'm going to split my damage. And this is where the speed boost from the opposing Crydon is a little bit awkward. I think if, like, Gio had close combated and then you're slower than it, you can get a collision course and maybe knock it out. Instead, this Crydon just is not able to get a one-hit knockout onto the Pokemon, and Calyrex crucially stays asleep. You know, had it woken up, Astral Barrage, that's probably actually just the win for James. And so, now, such a difficult position, both Pokemon asleep. The key question I have here is, does James try to play defensively, switch in that Incineroar? If you do, though, you are vulnerable to eating up a close combat or a Spore.
It's hard to make that call to go for the close combat, though, when you know that one of the drawbacks is going to be dropping your special defense and defense. But the Shadow Rider Calyrex does wake up. It just goes for a protect. Decides to play it just a little safe, as now we will see Giovanni go for that close combat into the opposing Crydon. It's so much damage, but there needs to be a bit more to follow it up. So maybe this Brubonnet is able to do just that. It does have access to that Seed Bomb, but decides to go for the Spore instead into the opposing Shadow Rider.
And that was a really safe play, right? Basically, close combat into the Crydon, just fell asleep. I get a ton of damage off. If you switch into Incineroar, it's eating that up as well. And honestly, Calyrex has just felt so useless throughout the course of this set. It's constantly not applying that much pressure with Astral Barrage, and you are threatened by that Sucker Punch as well. So this next turn, you could go for the Sucker Punch onto the Calyrex slot. If you're James, you consider going for maybe an Encore or a Protect, for example. You could even switch out instantly Incineroar, but then the question is, how does James deal enough damage, right?
Yeah, it is so tough. Even if you go for the Encore play, is the Incineroar in the back with just that knockoff as its priority or main form of damage, actually going to help you get through these Pokemon that kind of resist that. So we'll have to see.
James really is hoping to at least get a wake up with that Crydon, but this turn could be huge. Gio, at any point, it feels like he could just win Worlds.
So the Shadow Rider Calyrex is going to go away, hoping to maybe bypass something like a Sucker Punch, or maybe even be able to, well, look at that. Unnerve actually getting off the field means that this Brubonnet can actually get a bit of HP recovery thanks to the Citrus Berry that it was holding. As the
James wakes up! It wakes up!
James actually is able to go for the Protect on the Crydon. That's a huge wake up to at least keep James in this second game. But the Brubonnet did go for the Sucker Punch, probably into the Shadow Rider Calyrex slot that the Incineroar came into, and the close paw combat now getting targeted into the Crydon. James is getting a couple of good turns correct.
This is so tense because if you don't get that wake up, you probably just, of course, get knocked out with the Crydon, and then it just feels so tough. James has been keeping himself in this one. Now you, of course, do have the ability to go for a fake out with the Incineroar. Crydon does have the ability to go for collision course, but it still feels so tense and so scary. But I think if James had not woken up with Crydon or Shadow Rider on the turns that they did, the game is probably just over. So he's played really nice defensively and has gotten himself into a position where at least he's threatening a fake out now.
He's got to fake out into either Gio's Crydon or this Brubonnet, and now you have to pick your poison. Which one do you think is going to be the bigger threat? Brubonnet does have Sucker Punch that you can throw into the opposing Crydon, and Gio says, I'm not going to opt into that variance. I am just going to go for the Protect onto my own Crydon, but that means means that this Brute Bonnet is going to be eating that fake out. Flame Charge, though, unfortunately from James, goes for the Protect, so you're not going to be able to get that speed advantage there either.
This Brute Bonnet has been a menace, especially now that it's healed up with that Citrus Berry as well, and so James had the ability to maybe go for a double up into the Brute Bonnet. Gio just goes for it relatively safe, right? He's like, you know, if I go for Protect here, even if you double up on a Brute Bonnet, I don't think you're going to knock me out. Now, of course, the Brute Bonnet is applying Sucker Punch pressure into the Koraidon, and Koraidon is applying close combat pressure into the Incineroar. And so this is still so scary. Like, it feels like it's just on a knife's edge, but it's been in Gio's advantage for so many turns, and I'm sure he can feel so close, but he still has to get there.
James has had a couple of calls where he's been able to bring in that Shadow Rider Calyrex after baiting something like that close combat in, so that it is a tool in his arsenal to give himself another turn. But Gio is going to actually take this Koraidon off the field and now bring in the Flutter Mane that we saw hit the field at the very beginning of this game number 2, and hopefully it'll be around for a little bit longer as James still goes for another defensive play. The knockoff into the Flutter Mane is going to finish it off, but Gio gets to bring in this Koraidon for free, set back up this Sun, and give this Brute Bonnet a Photosynthesis defense boost. And the 4 as well. You're putting this Incineroar to sleep.
Sacrificing Flutter Mane, which I think makes a lot of sense at this point in the game. Flutter Mane is a really good late game option if you have that Focus Sash, right? Or if the Terra hasn't been committed on Koraidon, but it makes sense to give it up here. Now Koraidon gets this, as you mentioned, set up the Sun, and you've got him to sleep off into the Incineroar, right? So there's still this mind game of like Sucker Punch plus close combat. I feel like Gio just is playing it relatively safe right now, right? He hasn't taken any super big risks. It is getting scary though, right? His Pokemon are relatively low HP. You do need the Koraidon to knock out this Incineroar. Otherwise, Brute Bonnet is really going to struggle into. So then the question I have this turn is, do we see a switch into the Shadow Rider slot? The Incineroar slot is rendered completely useless, of course. You could go for that close combat. Koraidon tries to Protect, trying to avoid another Sucker Punch right now.
It's not able to get it though, but the Brute Bonnet is going to go for a Rage Powder just to draw away any attention from the opposing Koraidon, as Gios gets to go for the Flame Charge to finish off. The opposition gets the speed boost that it had removed from itself after going back into its ball. And James now down to just his final 2 Pokemon, the Sleepy Incineroar and the Shadow Rider Calyrex.
I absolutely love that play because I think the main thing you're scared about right now is Calyrex switching in. Gio realizes, okay, if I give you an opportunity to stall another sleep turn, that's not great. I think that play may have just won him the World Championship. Now you've got a Koraidon that's faster than both of these Pokemon. And this is what I was saying. The Incineroar is cool, but it doesn't really do that much damage. Koraidon now will outpace the Calyrex, right? And so you can target that Calyrex slot down. You could just go for something like Sucker Punch in close combat. And I think we're about to crown a brand new World Champion.
Feels super safe for the Brute Bonnet to direct that Sucker Punch into the Shadow Rider Calyrex, and then the Koraidon to follow up with that close combat into the Incineroar. But what does Gio decide to lock in? Potentially get himself that World Championship title. And can James do anything to be able to claw back into this one? There's still a lot of HP on this Incineroar, and it's still a Shadow Rider Calyrex, one of the most powerful Pokemon that we have seen in this format.
It's one of the most powerful, but one of the reasons why Brute Bonnet has been tremendous is because of its Dark typing to deal with that Shadow Rider. Koraidon does Protect here, though, to start.
Gengar actually goes for the Encore. So this Brute Bonnet is going to be stuck going for Rage Powder for the rest of the couple of turns.
Okay, ends up being the Encore, of course. You could have locked into Sucker Punch. It is going to be that Rage Powder now. I think it's still fine for Gio because now you can just keep Rage Powdering away from the Incineroar. Koraidon being faster than the Calyrex will get the knockout onto it. But, you know, it will faint from a Life Orb tick.
Yeah.
And if it faints from a Life Orb tick, it means you can only get a knockout onto one Pokemon.
You've got either the ability to go for the close combat into the Incineroar, or to try to go for maybe a Flame Charge into this Shadow Rider Calyrex. But what if that Calyrex protects? Then all of a sudden, if you're stuck with Rage Powder onto this Brute Bonnet, then there's no way for you to actually be able to deal with an Astral Barrage.
Yeah, I think for Gio, it's like you go for Rage Powder in close combat right now, you knock out the Incineroar, you know that you're going to lose your Koraidon, but then Calyrex can just go for the Astral Barrages, and so James might pull this one off.
It's going so close, but Brute Bonnet, of course, has to go for an Encore with that Rage Powder, and that will direct away anything from this Incineroar if it even survives this close combat, which of course it will not, because that is super effective. And Koraidon, that's going to be all it's able to do for the rest of this game. It's going to get knocked out to the Rocky Helmet recoil instead. So now it's up to the Shadow Rider Calyrex from James, the last bastion of hope for him into this game number 2 to
unbelievable comeback. Like, it felt like Gio just had the advantage, but James finds the position. Because Brute Bonnet just fakes, and that's it. We're going to game 3.
A game 3 between two phenomenal players from the United States. James Evans, the previous world champion from 2018 in the seniors division, and Cischke, who is looking for his first major title win ever. And they are both tied 1-1.
That felt so close. Like, it felt like Gio had the advantage every turn, and James got turn after turn after turn right defensively. He needed to get some early wake-ups, but he managed to pull it off. And Gio gives up some of that offense, switches in the Flutter Mane. The Flutter Mane ends up fainting. Crydon comes back in. And oh my goodness, like I was saying, I think Gio's got it. He's got it. It's over. But no, James manages to pull it off. And Shadow Rider finally finding the position to deal damage. What a comeback by James. That was masterful. He had to play defensively for so many turns, and I think Gio's probably thinking, oh, if I just like made one aggressive prediction in that couple of turns where I was getting baited out by the protects, I think that's it, I win. But I think he tries to play just kind of safe and gets punished for it, and James manages to weave in a victory there. I'm honestly blown away by that win.
I am so impressed. On paper, Gio looks to have the more favorable matchup, and as you were already saying before we were heading into the match, maybe yesterday, Gio would have just won on the spot, won this with just the advantage from the team compositions alone, but James has had all day and night to be able to prepare for this matchup and found a way to get himself back into the match and with a chance to win the World Championship title once again.
There are so many different ways this matchup can play out. We've basically seen the same Pokemon, right? And so I'm wondering, does James now shift to that Raging Bull that I was talking about? Because we saw Gio go for the Terra on the Brute Bonnet. If you Water Terra that Brute Bonnet, you are exceptionally weak to Raging Blow. Gio has gone with this Flutter Mane Chi-Yu lead, and honestly, coming into this matchup, that was not a lead that I thought he would even really consider, right? Like, you have a lot of even more aggressive offense from things like Flutter Mane Crydon, Chi-Yu Crydon. Lunala has not even made an appearance in this one, but of course has the ability to go for the wide guard, which of course can be really nice against the Calyrex Shadow Rider. We also have not seen Ursaluna hit the field. I think Ursaluna would be such a bold adjustment, but it's really difficult to feel confident with it, especially because James keeps showing, I'm gonna go Incineroar, I'm gonna go Brute Bonnet. But if you think maybe the Incineroar is gonna get dropped, Raging Bolt comes out, then Ursaluna and a moat around that could work.
It could, but it's still so tough because you're going to need to have the Trick Room set up. You want to make sure you have a turn to actually activate the Guts ability with that Flame Orb to give yourself the burn. And that's just some valuable time you might not be able to get if James decides to go for an aggressive game plan.
This is so scary for both players because you've both seen each other do the same thing in terms of Pokemon choice, right? And Team Preview has so many implications. There's nothing worse than you not making an adjustment, your opponent makes an adjustment, and you're just so far behind right from the first turn.
Well, one more game between Gio and James will decide who becomes the world champion at the 2025 Pokemon World Championships. And let's just run it back, Aaron. It's the same leads from games 1 and 2.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times, just like a Surging Strikes here, as there is such a different position here because both players are really trying to get into each other's heads, right? We saw the Dark Pulse go onto Brute Bonnet last time around. There is the ability, once again, for the Ghost Terra from the Chi-Yu, but that only gets you past one turn of Fake Out. That is a really big liability, so I think Gio recognizes, well, that's nice, but then does that actually get me enough of an advantage to really commit going for it? So we've seen so many different turns play out. And I'm curious if it's going to be a repeat of the last 2 games or if it's something new here.
It's tough because even when James has had access to the Fake Out onto the Incineroar, that's actually sometimes not a move he's decided to go for. Maybe looking at something like the Parting Shot a little bit better, but Gio actually is going to go ahead and save that Chi-Yu for later. It's going to be the Brute Bonnet that comes in, and a pretty defensive turn all around as that Flutter Mane is also going to go for the Protect. With the Brute Bonnet switching in, it means that that's going to be what has to eat the Fake Out, and Brute Bonnet isn't able to get the Sucker Punch damage onto Gio's Flutter Mane this time around.
Oh, crucially, the ability to once again go for damage onto the Brute Bonnet. That's now twice that Brute Bonnet has not terra'd in front of so much super effective special damage, right? And so now the opposing Brute Bonnet is out. There is a lot of Spore pressure from both sides. We thought coming into this battle would be the war of the Brute Bonnets, and that is certainly the case here.
there's so many options that these Brute Bonnets can go for as well. If you don't Terra, you're susceptible to the Spore. You can also Rage Powder to try to redirect away an opposing Sucker Punch. So that's one way that Gio can actually keep this Fluttermane partner safe. And then you can just go for all of these Moonblasts or even just some of these Shadow Balls to make sure you're getting any valuable damage down onto either this Incineroar, this Brute Bonnet, or whatever decides to switch in. But we are going to see a Terrestrialization on this turn.
Oh, it's going to be onto the Fluttermane. That, of course, is going to give it a nice little damage boost. And so this could be an absolutely huge turn. Giovanni could just get the knockout onto the Brute Bonnet and then put Incineroar to sleep.
Oh, there's
and no Terra!
This Brute Bonnet is going to stay on Dark type, which means that this Moonblast is going to get a one-hit knockout. It is super effective. And Gio is able to get one Pokemon knockout right away in this game 3.
And there wasn't even a Sucker Punch, and it's knockoff in a Brute Bonnet. It's a disaster for James Evans here, as the Brute Bonnet now gets a Spore off as well. Oh my goodness, I was gonna say Gio there could have maybe protected the Fluttermane, could have just gone for a regular Moonblast, but it ends up being Stellar Moonblast, saying, you have not terrored your Brute Bonnet so many times in front of my offense. I mean, this is an unbelievable lead for Gio. Last game I thought Gio had a big lead. This one feels even larger.
It's gonna be Koraidon that has to take that Brute Bonnet's place, but it doesn't want to be on the receiving end of a Moonblast either. James has preserved the Terrestrialization, so you are able to use that to try to take this Koraidon's negative energy away from it. But it's still a tough uphill battle.
James played a defensive masterclass in game 2 though, and found the switches that he needed to keep himself in the game. He is at a major disadvantage right now, but we've seen him pull it off once. And so right now, the upside is that you are not threatened by one-hit knockouts from the opposing side, and you are pressuring your own knockout onto the opposing Brute Bonnet. Fluttermane Shadow Ball, however, of course, will do considerable damage. And so you could consider just going for something like a Sucker Punch on a Shadow Ball, or Rage Powder on a Shadow Ball, for example. For Gio's end, you're looking to just get that Koraidon low enough, and I think Shadow Ball plus Sucker Punch puts it in KO range from another subsequent Shadow Ball.
Feels like James is almost forced to have to go for a Protect here onto the Koraidon. Make sure you aren't going to be taking too much damage from those boosted Shadow Balls. But we do see the Terrestrialization committed, and so it's going to be that Koraidon that does get rid of its Dragon typing, now becomes a full Fire type, and maybe that means we're going to see something like a Flame Charge or a Flare Blitz. Really make sure that you're getting as much out of these Fire turns as possible. But Incineroar is going to be on the receiving end of an attack, as the Collision Course now will finish off this Brute Bonnet once and for all. It's been such a mess so far in these games, but that critical hit, that's got to sting.
Yeah, securing the knockout there onto Brute Bonnet. I mean, Brute Bonnet is actually very physically defensive on the opposing team, and so I think there's actually maybe a chance it could survive that without the critical hit. But you could see, Rose, you were saying, hey, Koraidon, protect. That makes a lot of sense. That's what James kept doing in that last game. Protect, make a safe switch. James is like, look, I've done that enough. I'm going to punch back with offense, and I think gets a really great turn. If you ate up a Sucker Punch and a Shadow Ball there, I think that could have been really scary. But I do wonder if Collision Course was guaranteed the one-hit knockout on a Brute Bonnet there. But for now, we're going to have to advance the game. Gio is going to get a free switch in, and it's going to be into Chi-Yu.
Okay, so the Chi-Yu comes back out, and that's going to give a nice special defense drop to both this Koraidon as well as this Incineroar, which is going to make sure that this Fluttermane can actually punch through a little bit more damage. Notably, we've only seen the Moonblast. It still has a Stellar Terra Power boosted Shadow Ball that it has access to throw that Koraidon's way.
Yeah, this is so scary, right? Like, do you double up onto the Koraidon? Does Koraidon go for kind of the obvious Protect? If so, an Incineroar faints, the next turn Koraidon is just vulnerable to eating up, double up, right? And so Chi-Yu and Fluttermane now positioned so well. You've got the speed advantage, especially because it wasn't a Flame Charge the previous turn. And so Gio has so much offense on his side. And the Incineroar, crucially, did not take over 50% last turn, but now the Beads of Ruin are active.
So that would be just one more Moonblast to knock out this Incineroar, and it still has a chance of waking up, but it's notably still asleep. Koraidon now will go ahead and go for the Protect, and as we see the Fluttermane go for the Shadow Ball into that slot, James is hoping this is going to be enough of a saving grace to actually let this Incineroar wake up, but the Heat Wave from this Chi-Yu will be able to connect onto both targets. Incineroar does take a pretty sizable amount of chip.
Oh, it doesn't wake up!
Incineroar stays asleep!
It stays asleep, but it is the Heat Wave lock. So now my question is, this Koraidon is bulky. Can it survive a Heat Wave and a Shadow Ball? If the answer is no, the game is done this turn. If so, you keep yourself in it, and you're able to retaliate back with either damage on the Flutter Mane or a knockout onto the Chi-Yu. But what makes this so tricky, Rose, is the fact that the Flutter Mane is still so healthy. There was no Sucker Punch earlier from the Brute Bonded to break that sash, and Flutter Mane right now feels like it's running away with the game.
Shadow Ball first from this Flutter Mane is going to go right in that Koraidon that protected on that last turn. This is a huge source
I don't
of
think it's gonna take it.
And the Chi-Yu goes for the Heat Wave to try to finish it off. A double KO, and Gio is one Pokemon away from becoming the world champion. Someone who has hunted for a major Pokemon title win in so many events previously, dating back to his time in the seniors division alongside James. And this could be the day he cements himself in Pokemon history.
This is his moment, and oh my goodness, he's staring down a full HP Flutter Mane and a Chi-Yu. Calyrex can get one Astral Barrage off, but it's not knocking out Chi-Yu.
And as it goes for the victory lap, this Flutter Mane brings this Calyrex down to its focus sash, and it's going to be the Chi-Yu looking at this final HP to deliver the finishing blow, and just like that, Giovanni Cischke is your 2025 Pokemon World Champion!
In an arena with over 5,000 live fans watching, unprecedented in Pokemon video game history. An arena that's crowned Olympic champions before. Gio now can call himself world champion, his very first tournament win, and what better way to do it than to win the world championships?
An incredible stage for an incredible player. Something that he has been dreaming of and striving for so long. Gio Cischke, take a bow. This is your moment, your day, your stage. It's all yours.
You can see the emotions. He's worked so hard for this, and it was an unbelievable way to do it. I think that second game, honestly, it was so nerve-wracking. It would have gotten to me, honestly, as a player. You're in those shoes and you're like, I'm just